All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Hello, hello. All right. Without putting this off any longer and without further ado, we are going to finish up 2 Samuel. With timely action, this actually makes this the fifth book in the Bible, or the second set of 5 in the Bible. After finishing 2 Samuel, we covered the first 5 books, and then this will be our second set of 5. With that, I did say I want to do a little main ideas and thoughts throughout the last 5 books, so let's just go ahead and go through that really quick. We are negating the intro. You guys deserve just the final wrap-up of 2 Samuel, ending our session for this time. Alright, so if we review the last 5 books we had, let's go backwards. We're on 2 Samuel, we covered 1 Samuel, we covered Ruth, we covered Judges, and then ending in Joshua. That would make 5 books. So with that, beginning in Joshua, he was really the first honorary king. Although he wasn't a king, he was really the first honorary ruler after Moses. So he was the next in line immediately after Moses to go ahead and rule the Israelites. So here, Israel really gets their first taste of civilized power. Because if we remember before that in Deuteronomy or Numbers, we had everybody sprawled out. Nothing was dedicated to each of the tribes of Israel. Now we have towns and dedications of land to each of the tribes, and Joshua was the one to go ahead and oversee that and rule over everybody in that manner. So we have Israel being built up as a civilization. With that, they get their first taste of power with Joshua as their leader. After that, we go into Judges, right? And that was actually a very intense book. We had a lot of rapid cycling of people coming to power and then declining from power. Really all at once. And then we go into Ruth. We have a little narrative of Ruth and Naomi. Ruth actually is David's great-great-grandmother. So that's how King David comes into the world and how he comes into play. As we learn about 1 Samuel and 2 Samuel, he begins to show himself in those books. Of course, with the introduction of Saul as the first king. And excuse me, this guy is noisy. You not need to be noisy, okay? I was just out there with you all morning. So he loves to harass me behind the door. Anyways, with giving you a brief synopsis of everything that we've covered, really the biggest takeaway out of these 5 books is the rise and climb to power and how that can be stripped away and how it can be rebuilt then again. This was not God's intention with the people of Israel. He actually recommended against having them a king, or against them having any kind of king. As we know, David or Saul would have been the first, and then David coming in second. So he is all against, God himself is all against having a king, but he grants them a king anyway, just so they could be like other civilizations. They could experience maybe the rulership that some other civilizations had. With this, let's go ahead and start out with our quote, and I think more themes will come up as we read the quote here. Hold on one moment. Alright, let's begin. What we gave, we have. What we spent, we had. What we kept, we lost. So this is really, if we remember this quote, we have read it before. We're restarting on our list of quotes, but this one is a good summary of what went on, especially in these last 5 books and this last book especially. So what the Israelites gave was oftentimes, in the place of a king, a lot of riches. A lot of the kings were very generous with their land. Oh my goodness, you guys. Air Force. You're just gonna keep. Stop. Too much. Stop it. Don't to do something. I just need a little privacy. Anyways, the kings spent a lot of money. They had lots of riches. They had lots of spoils of war. This really was maintained. Israel never really lost its wealth, and we'll actually begin to learn in 1st and 2nd Kings how much wealth Israel has actually accumulated over this time. What we spent, we had. When you think of spending, when we think of spending, we think of money. But in this case, what the Israelite tribes spent the most of was human life. I'm just going to put it like that. They were militarized. That was one of the reasons the Lord did not want them to take up kings, is they were often militarized. So they lost a lot of human life, whether it was by the hand of God or by their own decision-making and war-making. So they had a lot of human life, and of course they continue to multiply, but it decreases over time. I guess it continues to multiply in their growth, but they do spend a lot of human life along the way. We'll just keep it at that. And it says, what we kept, we lost. So a lot of the kings and the judges throughout these 5 books, they wanted to hold on to their power as long as possible, really as long as their lives allowed them to, as long as their old age allowed them to. They wanted to hold on to the power. Even many of the judges, like Samson and others, they wanted to hold on to that power, but it was always lost in the end and shifted onto somebody else. So the legacy in their story still remains, but really that power dwindles, over time as they pass away. So one thing here also under the what we gave part that I was trying to mention is a theme throughout these 5 books, is giving and service to the Lord. So yes, these kings were very generous. These towns had a lot to give. I know you hear that in the background. These towns had a lot to give, but they also really focused on, as Israelites, as people of the Lord, is giving to the Lord in service or vows or commitment. That was one thing that was very popular. Even in the book of Ruth, we had Ruth and Naomi vowing themselves to the Lord. We had a lot of mothers vowing their children to the Lord so they would grow up as Nazarites. Right? As a Nazarite, you cannot drink wine, anything from the vine, so anything grape. You can't have anything fermented, so no alcohol. So that is the sacred vow that is kept between you and the Lord. You're also not supposed to cut your hair. That is a common part of the Nazarites. With that vow in the Lord, a lot of judges and a lot of individuals grew closer and closer with the Lord, retaining more of that power. So that is actually one way, if you do want to retain power and keep a lot of your legacy and power, is to make that special vow with the Lord, like many people often do. So, with that, let's go ahead and get into 2 Samuel. It's a little bit longer, so if you want to make sure you have the time to listen, I would recommend that. Hopefully the kitty quiets down out there. But anyways, this is part 12, chapter 20. Now a troublemaker named Sheba, son of Bikiri, a Benjamite, happened to be there. He sounded a trumpet and shouted, "We have no share in David, no part in Jesse's son, every man to his tent Israel." So as we remember, I know it's been a few days, David is coming across the Jordan and coming back into Jerusalem. He's met with somebody who is rebelling against him. He's already quoted as a troublemaker here in the Bible, so we can kind of expect that, maybe not a lot of people would take his side. But that is not the case. Actually, a lot of Israelites did side with this Sheba, son of Bikiri, and did not greet David. As we know, we had half of the Israelite tribes, half of everybody going to fetch David, and we had all of Judah going to fetch David. So he was pretty well backed, as we discussed in the last video. But upon entering, the people that remained were more on the side of this Sheba troublemaker. So let's go ahead and continue. So Joab's men and the Kerethites and Pelethites and all the mighty warriors went out under command of Abishai. They marched out from Jerusalem to pursue Sheba, son of Bikiri. All the troops of Joab came and besieged Sheba in Abel Beth Maakah. They built a siege ramp up to the city and stood it against the outer fortifications. While they were battering the wall to bring it down, a wise woman called from the city, "Listen, listen, tell Joab to come here so I can speak to him." He went to her and she asked, "Are you Joab?" "I am," he answered. She said, "Listen to what your servant has to say." "I'm listening," he said. So in this instance, the wise woman comes to, stop Joab in his tracks. Because we talked about Joab, he's very aggressive, he's very warlike, he's a no mercy type of individual. She actually stops Joab and says, Israel was never like this. Israel was a place of peace. We thrive upon peace and community, so what good is it for you to, besiege and tear down another part of the nation? So with that, he's like, okay, well, just bring me Sheba, then we won't have to break into your fortifications, and there will be no large conflict if you just bring me the person we're looking for. So in response, she actually says, okay, we'll give you his head. So they took off Sheba's head and tossed it over the wall, and that ended the battering of their fortifications, and it kind of ended the conflict for the time, right? But just kind of a lot going on that had to take place, very, very aggressive, even within Israel. It says here, during the reign of David, there was a famine for 3 successive years. David sought the face of the Lord. The Lord said, "It is on account of Saul and his blood-stained house. It is because he put the Gibeonites to death." So with this, let me just continue. It says, David asked the Gibeonites, "What shall I do for you? How shall I make atonement so that you will bless the Lord's inheritance?" So again, with this, it's a little bit confusing as to why maybe the Lord is holding on to this grudge with Saul's house, and how he said not to put the Gibeonites to death, but they put the Gibeonites to death. We don't know, right? It's a little bit of a mystery why God calls upon certain times to go ahead and reap judgment. We just will go ahead and go with the fact that his judgment is fair and it's just, and it's everything in good timing. Because things that happen in the spiritual world are at such almost time that I would say what we're used to. So the way that the Lord reaps justice and makes everything balanced and even might be a little bit, we might get a little caught off guard with that. I'm not sure. But David goes ahead and asks the Gibeonites how can he make atonement to them for the injustice that Saul took upon them. So they said, "Let 7 of Saul's male descendants be given to us to be killed, and their bodies exposed before the Lord at Gibeah of Saul, the Lord's chosen one." So with this, the King David spared Mephibosheth, son of Jonathan, the son of Saul, because of the oath before the Lord between David and Jonathan, and son of Saul. So, oh my goodness, I'm about to lose it. I'm so sorry, you guys. Hey, what is the problem? What is the problem? Stop. I don't understand what the problem is today. Oh my goodness. They're not allowed in the room for this reason. Come back. Let's see if this continues. You realize I have a lot going on. Anyways, we remember David making the commitment to the son of Saul. You're always welcome at my table. Let's share in the splendor. Let's reunite. David made that commitment. So he spared Mephibosheth, but he did end up having to sacrifice a lot of other family members of Saul. His concubines and his sons' concubines and their sons and their children. So that's not really a good thing, but that was the atonement that the Gibeonites had asked for. Again, getting even. Some things are confusing, and I don't know what to make about them. But anyways, once again, there was a battle between the Philistines and Israel. David went down with his men to fight against the Philistines, and he became exhausted. But Abishai, son of Zeruiah, came down to David's rescue. He struck the Philistine down and killed him. Then David's men swore to him, saying, "Never again will you go with us to battle, so that the lamp of Israel will not be extinguished." So David is up there in years, right? He's starting to become tired, and he's starting to become really exasperated with all of the war and things going on, right? This was just a moment of him rejoicing to the Lord because of the people that came to his defense. David sang to the Lord the words of this song when the Lord delivered him from the hand of all his enemies and from the hand of Saul. This might be a little bit out of place, but it's a beautiful song if you'd like to read it in chapter 22. In my distress I called to the Lord. I called out to my God. From his temple he heard my voice. My cry came to his ears. He reached down from high and took a hold of me. He drew me out of deep waters. To the pure, show yourself pure, but to the devious, show yourself shrewd. Okay, he drew me out of deep waters. To the pure, you show yourself pure, but to the devious, you show yourself shrewd. You provide a broad path for my feet, so that my ankles will not give away. The Lord lives. Praise be to my rock. Exalted be my God, the rock, my Savior. So really a beautiful excerpt here that David speaks upon the Lord. I would recommend reading the whole thing because it's very, very nice and just a good incantation or song to go ahead and praise the Lord with. So with this too is a bit of foreshadowing, because David has not yet passed, and he does live for quite some time after this. We actually don't see his death at the end of 2 Samuel, but this is what it says here. It shows his last words. These are the last words of David, son of Jesse, the utterance of the men exalted by the Most High, the man's anointed by the God of Jacob, the hero of Israel's songs. So these are just the last few lines here, but again, if you'd like to read what David has to say, go to chapter 23 in 2 Samuel. It says, "But evil men are all to be cast aside like thorns, which are not gathered with the hand. Whoever touches thorns uses a tool of iron or the shaft of the spear. They are burned up where they lie." So again, talking about his enemies. This really shows, see, if I let him in for 2 seconds, will he be a pain in the butt? And this is me giving up. Misbehaving. Anyways, this really shows how militarized David became, right? He was giving grace to the Lord, right? But he was very enthralled in all of the war times that they had been throughout his whole life, even since he was a child. That really made up the bulk of his life, even though he experienced moments of peace and joy and calmness with his family and celebration. Really war-torn most of the life of a king, I would say. It's just something that comes with it. That's what God was advising against when he said, "Do not elect a king." Anyways, it says here, at the time, David was in a stronghold, and the Philistine garrison was at Bethlehem. So the Philistines have moved in yet again to Bethlehem. David longed for water and said, "Oh, that someone would get me a drink of water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem." So 3 mighty warriors broke through the Philistine lines, drew water from the well near the gate of Bethlehem, and carried it back to David. But he refused to drink it. Instead, he poured it out before the Lord. He said, "Far be it from me, Lord, to do this." He said, "It is not the blood of men who are at risk. Is it not the blood of men who went at the risk of their own lives?" And David would not drink it. So with this, David is starting to feel the guilt, right? He's dying of thirst, and his brave warriors and soldiers go and try to quench his thirst, and, they got the water, and he wouldn't even drink it because the guilt at that moment had washed over him. He had realized, what he had become as a leader and as a king. With this, it says also there were 30 other great warriors that needed to be mentioned in the list. I'm not going to list all 30, but here are a few. We have Abiezer from Anathoth, Sibbecai the Hushite, Zelek the Ammonite, Necherai the Kerethites, the armor-bearer of Joab, son of Zeruiah. Again, some great warriors that needed to be mentioned because of the things that they upheld. But it says again in chapter 24, again the anger of the Lord burned against Israel, and he incited David against them, saying, "Go and take a census of Israel and Judah." So this part is a bit confusing because the Lord does not ask David to take a census. Because of the Lord's anger, I don't know if it was from Saul or just the fact that, there's really has not been peace within Israel and the outskirts of Israel for a long time. It incites David to go ahead and take a census, and David was not asked to take a census. This was his own ego trying to count the number of fighting men that was available to Israel. So really David was trying to feed his ego. So he asks people to go out and start counting everybody in Israel and Judah. They went toward the fortress of Tyre and all the towns of the Hittites and Canaanites. Finally, they went on to Beersheba in the Negev of Judah. After they'd gone through the entire land, they came back to Jerusalem at the end of 9 months and 20 days. So that just goes to show you how long and how much of a process that consumed, just feeding purely their own ego as rulers, right? David and his military, right? Anyways, took a long time. If you want to go see the final count of the census, be my guest. It's in there. It says here, David was conscious-stricken after he had counted the fighting men. He said to the Lord, "I have sinned greatly in what I have done. Now, Lord, I beg you, take away the guilt of your servant. I have done a very foolish thing." So, interestingly enough, the Lord realizes, David's ask, for forgiveness and sorrow, but he gives them 3 options. And let me just recall, just so I can quote them correctly. He gives them 3 options as atonement. It says here, "Shall there come on you 3 years of famine in your land?" That's option 1. "Or 3 months of fleeing from your enemies while they pursue you?" That's option 2. "Or 3 days of plague in your land?" Now think it over and decide. So this is these are the options that the Lord gives. I'm trying to see who reported this. Anyways, David, being the smart man that he is, he's like, let us fall into the hands of God versus any human hands. Again, I do think that's his ego talking. He didn't want, of course, his enemies to come and chase them around for 3 years. That does sound a little bit miserable. So he says, if anything, please let's go by the hand of the Lord. So the Lord goes ahead and strikes a plague for 3 days against Israel. There is a death toll that takes place after that. And just as the angel was going to touch Judah with the plague, the Lord says, "Enough, withdraw your hand." The angel of the Lord was then at the threshing floor of Araunah the Jebusite. It says here, when David saw the angel who was striking down the people, he said to the Lord, "I have sinned. The shepherd, I have done wrong." I have sinned, the shepherd. I, the shepherd, have done wrong. These are but sheep. What have they done? Let your hand fall on me and my family. So after the death was so great, even after it was a mere 3 days, it was nothing like a 3-year trouble, and it was nothing like a 3-month fleeing from your enemies. Oh, yeah, the 3 years would have been the famine. That would have been rough. or the 3 months fleeing from your enemies. This was 3 days of plague, but that was too much for David still, so he takes it back. He takes it back. He says, let your hand fall on me instead, after, the death and everything was occurring. But you could see the guilt that he feels, right? Because of his sins that happened over time. These cats, you guys, I'm going to lose my mind. These sins that have happened over time. And, the guilt is starting to set in, right? Of course, what is the key when you're feeling this is to ask for forgiveness and to admit your wrongs. Admit the wrongs. That is the most important part, and this is what David is really beginning to realize. Even though he's been always a bit forthcoming, and he's always been proactive with certain things and wanting to please the Lord, this is really shining through in this moment, and he asks the Lord's hand to fall on him and his family. This is where it ends. This is where 2 Samuel ends. It kind of ends just as we start to decline in the plot. I'm going to give you guys a break because that was a lot. That was a lot for one morning, and I see I am very short on time this morning as usual. But yes, it was a lot. I'm going to give you a bit of a break before we get into 2 Kings. We have finished the second part of our 5 books. We're now at 10 books, I think 80 to 90 written pages long. And why they want to do this right now, they're quiet all morning. This is the other thing. I haven't been waking up at 5 a.m. anymore because they actually sleep in the morning now. I'll wake up at a decent time, like 8:30. But they want to act up when I'm in here speaking, and they get excited, want me to come out there. Anyways, cats. We are at 94 written pages, 10 books of the Bible. I appreciate you guys for sticking with me throughout all of this, and my lack of consistency, I apologize, but perhaps you can understand the demands, or maybe not. It's okay. But I'll give you a little break, and I'll come back on here to start our next section of 5 books. Thank you all for listening once again. Have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.